All right, good morning. We're here. This is New Brunswick Today, alongside Mayor Jim Cahill. New Brunswick just started his 7th term as mayor, and we got some questions for you today. So I'll get right into it. We asked the community to tell us what they wanted to hear from you, and kind of one of the big prevailing questions that people want to know about is what's being done about the crime problem in New Brunswick. What steps are you taking to make the city safer, and what are you doing to keep the cops in line?
Well, let's break that question down into several. With regard to the dealing with crime, we're swearing in 8 new police officers, I believe next week. Our budget calls for additional officers, a few more left from the 2014 budget. We look to increase the number of officers beyond that in the 2015 budget, which we're starting to put together now. We've developed a very good and cooperative working relationship with Rutgers University and their police department. We are continuing to improve intelligence gathering in and around the different neighborhoods, particularly where those seem to be incurring some increase in criminal activity. There's been collaboration with other law enforcement entities around the state, we continue to do, I think, a pretty good job in protecting the lives and properties of the residents and businesses in the city of New Brunswick. As far as your question as to what are you doing to keep the cops in line, I don't understand it.
Oh, well, I just think there have been a fair amount of complaints about police behavior. You know, there's obviously a huge problem at internal affairs. You know, what is your administration doing to keep?
Well, I think that's an inaccurate assessment. To the contrary, I think the number of complaints about the police department have significantly gone down since the improvements that we put into place in a couple of years ago. The officers that are assigned to internal affairs have done a remarkably good job. So I think your assessment is based upon false information. Okay.
So what have you done specifically? You talk about the reforms you did. So you mean the internal affairs review process?
No, I'm talking about the whole structural reform. The New Brunswick Police Department went through a very intense accreditation process. They achieved that. They've been reviewed by the highest levels of review agencies of law enforcement entities in the state, and they passed with flying colors. They put in new training procedures, new regulations, and I think all of those standards and trainings have helped to not only improve the community service component of what law enforcement does, but I also think it raises the standard of the overall capability of our police department.
Sure. For example, I was arrested this summer, and you might have read that the police used a tactic where they pretended to be someone with a news tip and called me up. Is that a reasonable and appropriate tactic for police to use in the United States of America?
That's a question that's asked of a police department, but I would imagine that police departments use a variety of different types of tactics to do. I'm certainly police officers, when they're undercover, they are not being completely upfront with the people that they're looking to apprehend or investigate. So in this instance, I don't find that to be intolerable.
Right. Okay. And so last time we met, you said that it was sort of your job to protect our ability, our First Amendment right to have a newspaper here. And, you know, my question to you is simple. Do you think it has a chilling effect on journalism when cops pretend to be people with news tips?
Have you been chilled?
I've been emboldened, but I'll be honest, people who might want to advertise with us, work for us, or give us news tips have been chilled.
Let me suggest. Well, let me ask you the first question. Was there an arrest warrant out for you?
I'm not here to answer questions. I'm asking you about the tactics.
No. You asked me a question in order for me to give you a bona fide answer. You asked me if people are chilled. So I am asking you if you were chilled. You said you were emboldened. I asked you if there was an arrest warrant for your arrest. If you're not going to answer it, that's okay. I understand.
Listen, I'm here to ask you a simple question.
I asked you a simple question.
Yes, I'm not here to answer the questions. The state police are under fire right now for pretending to be journalists. Mm-hmm. That's something they've been criticized for. Okay. New Brunswick police pretend to be news tipsters.
Okay.
And you're saying that's acceptable? What about pretending to be a priest?
No. You asked me the question, and I gave you an answer. The answer was, I did not find it to be intolerable.
Okay.
You want to talk about it longer and longer and longer, that's okay, but that's my answer. Now, if you're going to be confrontational through this conversation, we can end it right now, and we can do whatever you want to do going forward. So I'm trying to extend to you the opportunity to ask me questions, mm-hmm. but if you want to be confrontational, that's okay. You're welcome to do that. I respect your right to do it. But if you're going to ask me questions, you better be ready and able to respond or choose not to respond to questions that I need answers to in order to answer your question.
Okay. Well, I'm not asking anything about my personal situation at this point. I'm asking you.
You just did.
At this point,
you threw your personal life about your arrest into your question. Mm-hmm. You can't back off once you've done that.
Okay.
You can't jump in and out. This is the part of the problem, Charlie. You contend you're a journalist, mm-hmm. and you certainly write articles. And depending upon what one's definition of journalist is, you certainly may meet that definition. You express yourself as a concerned citizen, and you jump in after you report on things. You opine on a whole lot of different subject matters, usually in a area that you are critical of. And the last is you're politically engaged. So it's hard doing what you do, wearing those three hats, and expect for people to give you answers thinking that the answers are going to be portrayed accurately, without slant, without bias, and without ulterior motive. So I'm willing to play this any way you want to, but I'm trying to respect your contention that you're a journalist and give you information that you can use to disseminate to the public with your journalist hat on. You want to turn it into something else, that's okay with me.
Okay, so my question was, is it okay for police to pretend to be doctors or priests? Is that an acceptable tactic in the United States of America?
I'm not going to talk about hypotheticals. In this situation, the one that you told me about, I indicated that police use various activities in order to get the job done. And in this situation, I didn't find it to be intolerable.
Okay. Fair enough. A lot of people wanted to know, why did you cancel the Christmas tree lighting ceremony? Great tradition in New Brunswick.
It is a great tradition. It's one we started. But it was, we had intelligence that told us that there were going to be a group of people who were going to be protesting and marching specifically to that area. We estimated that the numbers may reach up to 500 people. And we also knew that we were going to have somewhere between 500 people, maybe even more, for the Christmas tree lighting. Sometimes when the weather's good, we get up to 1,000 people. And we thought, and it all was going to happen at the exact same time, in order to protect the rights of those that were going to be marching and protesting to get to Monument Square. We thought it would be best not to put people who had cross purposes in the very same area. Well, I won't say cross purposes that were not similar. It didn't make sense to make what could be a tense situation that much more difficult for the police department and or the protesters. And lastly, the weather was bad. So We thought that maybe there wouldn't be such a great turnout. It might discourage people from congregating in the area, just saying what's going on. And we just thought it made the most sense. And quite frankly, I'm glad I made the decision. I've not heard any complaints with regard to the cancellation of the tree lighting ceremony, and the protest went along. I won't say without hitch, because if our intelligence was correct and that these stated destination was going to be Monument Square, once the Christmas tree lighting was canceled, they moved over to Route 18.
Yeah, and so what do you think about that protest? It was a sizable protest. It was, largely based on the video evidence of the man being killed by the New York police. Mm-hmm. What do you think about that issue and the massive protests that have erupted? Do you support the protesters? Or?
I support the right of people to protest. I support any time we can talk about better police-community relations. I don't specifically have an opinion about the specific incidents because I don't know what happened. I wasn't there, and I didn't see the evidence that was generated, so I don't have an opinion. I can say that it happens all too often, mm-hmm. that people of color are on a fatal end of police actions, and whatever we can do to make sure that happens on a less frequent basis is certainly an obligation we all have as a community, as a society, regardless of whether we're government officials or police officers or regular old folk.
Sure. And so one of the things people have suggested might help is having police officers wear cameras. Is that something you see the New Brunswick Police Department doing this year or in the future?
I don't see it happening immediately. It is something that we will continue to look at and see what procedures can and should be adopted, not only locally but at the state level. But we'll work with the county prosecutor's office and the Attorney General's office to see the benefits and or disadvantages of it. If it is something that's indicative or indicates that it looks like a worthwhile process and one that will give us accurate accounts of what happens, assuming the camera is on, and or helps to guide conduct of both police and citizens, then there'll be something we go after. And it's a question of identifying the dollars to pay for it.
Okay. So I want to shift gears and talk about, there's this great street in New Brunswick, Mine Street. It's actually eligible for historic designation. Mm-hmm. Is that something you're happy about?
I'm not going to comment on Mine Street because it's a pending application before the planning board, and I don't think it would be appropriate for me to make a statement while the planning board members are hearing testimony and or deliberating. I don't want to influence their decision.
Okay. So you won't talk about the buildings being demolished, you won't talk about the historic designation, you won't talk about anything to do with the street? Or, I was just kind of asking in general, are you happy there's a historic designation? Not in regards to any particular development.
Am I happy there's a historic designation?
It's eligibility.
Well, that's two different things.
It's eligible for a historic certification, the entirety of Mine Street.
That makes me neither happy nor unhappy.
Okay. It's not an asset to have historic assets. Historic
it can be
districts.
It can be, but it is not always.
Okay.
There's a lot that goes into those types of things. Historic designation of a district can be very helpful for those homeowners and property owners who are looking to improve and have the money and the desire and the wherewithal to improve the properties to a standard that is required under historic designation. It can also be a frustrating item for people who don't have the funds that are necessary to improve a building to historic standards. It is almost always the case that if you are going to improve a building to historic standards, it's going to cost a lot more. And that can frustrate and or undermine the rehabilitation of buildings that are in need of rehabilitation.
Understood. So just more broadly, do you think Mine Street is historic? Do you think it's worthy of a district?
I've not done an assessment of that, nor do I know that I'm qualified to do that. I know there are certain buildings on the street that, from a layman's perspective, look kind of old and historic and pretty nice.
Yeah.
In all the ways that means something. But there's also some buildings that are very far from historic on that building. So I think the process should go forward, and that's the beauty of the process.
Sure. And so I want to ask about Mr. Buca, the planning board attorney. Mm-hmm. Do you think it was appropriate for him to represent the planning board when Rutgers had applications before them?
Again, Charlie, there's an application or a complaint filed with the ethics board, and it wouldn't be appropriate for me to give my impression of that.
Okay.
While the ethics commission is taking a look at it. I hope that the ethics, and I trust that the ethics committee will do a thorough review of it, and if the action was appropriate, so be it. If the action was inappropriate, so be it, and they'll make a ruling, and we'll deal with it accordingly.
Okay, but just so, like, hypothetically, if you were the planning board attorney in Glassboro and Rowan University wanted to build something, would you?
Nothing. I don't talk about hypotheticals.
You don't talk about hypotheticals?
Generally not. There's no
Generally
reason to.
Okay. Well, I'll move on. I want to talk about the schools. I think the schools are one of the biggest things holding New Brunswick back, and I know that we have an elected board now. What would you like to see in the the people who run for and serve on the Board of Ed?
I think there should be dedicated people who have genuine concern about the quality of education for our children, and at the same time be mindful of the cost of education. And it's a nice balancing act. It's like what we do for government. You try to provide the absolute best service that you can, but you try to do it at a cost that is effective and within the ability for our residents to pay. Not always a easy line to walk.
And what do you think is should be the priorities of the board? We have the Red Shaw School open now. That's a great thing. What next for the school system? Well,
structures are important, particularly because if you walked through the old Red Shaw School, the one on Livingston Avenue before it was torn down, was a magnificent building. But if you walk through the new one as well, there's a whole different atmosphere. It's brighter, it's cheerier, it seems to be significantly more conducive to a learning environment. So there'll be more bricks and mortar coming down the pike. But I think the most important decision to be made in the near future for the school board is who's going to be the new superintendent.
Absolutely.
And so I think that we've been very fortunate to have Rich Kaplan as superintendent. He took our school district to a new level, and I could not be more pleased with his tenure here. But I think that the next superintendent should be qualified to take us into even greater heights than we are right now.
Okay, let's talk about the water system. We've seen a lot of changes in the past year. Can you tell me how do you know Ed O'Rourke? How long has he been with this administration?
I've known Ed O'Rourke since at least I've been involved in city government. Mm-hmm. Certainly through the 80s. And he is a New Brunswick guy, grew up in New Brunswick, but Most of my familiarity with Ed comes through his position as the licensed operator for the city's water system.
Right, and is your belief that he was solely responsible for the problems that resulted in the DEP, issuing violations?
There's nothing to indicate anything to the contrary.
Okay, and I guess what do you think is reasonable? What's fair to happen to Mr. O'Rourke for what he has done?
Well, the only question before me as the mayor of the city as to what should happen to him is he should no longer be employed at the city of New Brunswick, and his disciplinary action against him seeks his removal.
Right.
And that's what we think should happen in relationship to his job with the city of New Brunswick. What happens beyond that is decisions that have been made or will be made by other entities. The DEP has suspended his license, and I understand that there may be further investigations that are being done through the Attorney General's office.
Correct. So I guess what's being done to make sure nothing like that ever happens again?
Well, we've tried to create levels of redundancy. Having greater oversight by other licensed operators or people who are qualified to be licensed operators. That serves two purposes. One is it not only allows for two people to monitor the quality of the water that we're producing and the reports that are being provided to DEP, but it also allows us to have a better shot to avoid the situation where someone resigns and moves on to another position where we have to scramble a little bit more than we would otherwise want to.
Of course. And so, yeah, that happened this summer, and you chose to bring in a company called American Water.
That's correct.
To basically provide services to the city at significant cost, like 80 grand a month. Now it's down to 70 grand a month. How do you justify those expenses in light of all the other needs of the water system?
Mm-hmm. I suppose that, and this is not a question for you to answer, but it is, how do you justify not doing it? Mm-hmm. The alternative was to shut down our water plant. In the state of New Jersey, in order to operate a water facility like ours, you need to have someone who has a T4 license. Mm-hmm. We had two of those folks as part of our redundancy approach that we were trying to invoke. Frank Marascia, who was our water utility director, moved on to American Water, right, for better opportunities and a variety of other reasons. It's closer to home, mm-hmm, less travel, more time at home.
No city council meetings.
No city council meetings. Keith Smith, who was our actual licensed operator, titled as such, mm-hmm, gave us notice several weeks later that he was going to follow the same path to a different, mm-hmm, water provider, but nevertheless go back to the private sector. So we solicited, we looked for people who were licensed operators and met the licensing requirements for that. In that short period of time that we devoted to that, we could not find anyone. To hedge our bets, we went out for an RFP and solicited proposals from a number of entities to come in and provide the licensed operation service only. We had somewhere between 5 and 8 entities come, mm-hmm, look at our facilities, and we had one proposal, I believe, that was submitted. And Charlie, I'm not going to tell you this is, necessarily completely accurate, spot on, but it's my best recollection some 6 months later. If you need more details, we can get it to you.
Fair enough.
And the proposal that came in was from another private entity, that the cost of which was double that of American Water. So we went back and spoke with a couple of the other operators to see if we could negotiate a better deal. And American Water provided us with not only the best dollar amount, but the best in coverage and service. So our options at that point in time were limited to two.
Right.
One
Middlesex
was,
or American.
Well, Middlesex or American, or the third option,
Okay.
which was shut down the treatment plant.
Gotcha.
If we shut down the treatment plant, the costs would be astronomical, and we would be in a similar situation to what we're experiencing now with payment of the water for the period of time that we had to shut our system down last year. I'm not going to estimate what the cost would be if we had to buy our water from Middlesex Water, if our plant was closed down, but I can tell you it would be astronomically higher than what we're paying right now. So what we did is we tried to provide as much coverage as we could around the clock while we were going through our upgrades, both procedurally and from a capital, both operationally as well as from an infrastructure perspective, to see so we could provide our focus on those things that we were doing, knowing that the quality of the water, which is the most critical piece, was going to be at the highest standard it could be. And we achieved that. Is it more expensive for this short period of time than if we had our own personnel in-house? The answer is yes. Is it more expensive than any other operator that would have come in? The answer is no, it's less expensive. And is it a better alternative to having to shut our treatment plant down and buy water from another private entity? And the answer is unequivocally, this was the option to take. And it's worked out well. In hindsight, it's worked out exceedingly well. We've enjoyed the benefit of a large company coming in, looking at our facilities, sharing some ideas. We were able to share some ideas with them. It's been I'd like to think, a mutually beneficial arrangement, but certainly from the city's perspective, it's been very helpful. It is not one that in its present context, I look forward to a long-term arrangement. It is one that I hope, as we continue to look for personnel, we can perhaps discontinue in its entirety. But unless and until I am completely comfortable that we have all the personnel we need on board to provide the services that we need, I'm not going to make a commitment that it's going to end at any given time.
Oh, so you're not willing to promise that it will end this summer?
I am willing to promise that that's my goal.
Okay.
But let's assume for the moment that at the end of that one-year commitment, we don't have the personnel, despite our best efforts, to come on board. Then we'll have to consider that. And for me to commit at this point in time, come hell or high water, that's not going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen over the course of the next 6 months. So my goal is at the end of this contract, conceivably sooner, but that's a contract, so you have to work those things out. That will be completely on our own again with all the personnel that we need to sufficiently run it. But my greater commitment is to make sure that the quality of water that we produce is the best it can be, and that we continue to maintain our rates among the absolute lowest in the state.
Understood. And so what personnel do you need to be able to discontinue the relationship with American?
I would think at least one more
Licensed
T4 licensed operator, and I think it would be advantageous to have a couple of one or two other folks who are T1s or T2s in the queue.
Okay. And the last thing I want to really touch on is Mike Mahoney. How long have you known Mike Mahoney, and you know, how do you feel about how things ended?
I guess I'm trying to think if I knew Mike before working with the city, and I don't have a recollection of that. So I probably knew Mike through his employment with the city. You know, suffice it to say, Mike is no longer employed by the city. He was disciplined. We sought his removal, and he's no longer employed by us. That is why we filed a disciplinary action, and we achieved what our disciplinary action sought.
Right, he resigned, right?
Yes, he resigned. He resigned. He resigned in the wake of a disciplinary action seeking his removal.
And so, can you tell me, did you receive any complaints about Mr. Mahoney before all this went down last winter? I mean, did you get complaints from his coworkers or from citizens?
Complaints about what?
About him being, you know, not a good housing inspector or not a good coworker?
Mike had some disagreement with at least one employee over the years in inspections. Mike was the chief housing officer, one of the people that worked for him, and Mike did not get along.
Right.
And I would say that as far as citizenry complaints, I think I don't recall any specifically. You know, somebody saying that he didn't do a good job of inspecting a particular piece of property. But I would say that it is, well, not common, not surprising that on occasion somebody would say, you know, the inspections division, like any division in the city, like anybody who goes to the store and shops, you know, that at some time they're not happy with the level of service they received.
Sure,
so,
sure.
There was nothing extraordinary or repetitive or constant with regard to Mr. Mahoney.
Okay. Can you tell me, do you know if he has any business interests that might be aligned with his work? Did he, you know, buy houses, or was he involved in, you know, the New Brunswick real estate business?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
I don't have any knowledge of that.
Okay. And I guess, you know, the last thing would be, you know, how did, you know, the state police said that it seemed that what was going on in terms of the distribution of cocaine was going on for years. How was it that, you know, New Brunswick's police were not able to discern this? You know, Mike Mahoney worked in the same building as the police station.
Well, you extrapolated from one fact another fact which may or may not be true.
Okay. Well, the New Brunswick police didn't effect an arrest on him or file charges against him. Why was that?
Well, let me get back to your first question. The state police indicated that this was an ongoing investigation for a period of years, to use yours. That does not mean, in and of itself, that Mr. Mahoney was engaged in that same stuff for a period of years. So, to extrapolate the second fact off of the first into a question, really, it's not something that I can answer because I don't know that.
Okay.
as to why the police department didn't do something earlier on, you're also assuming that the police department was not involved with the state police investigation as a joint investigation that is ongoing through law enforcement. And that's not an assumption I'm going to accept, and nor am I going to comment any further on it.
Okay.
The last thing is, if the point of your question is, why wasn't Mahoney, who, based upon your first question, involved in drug trafficking for a 3-year period, picked up by New Brunswick police during that 3-year period, I suppose the same question could be posed to the state police who were doing the investigation over the 3-year period. Why didn't at some point in time they effectuate an arrest during that 3-year period? Those are all questions better posed to the state police.
Sure, fair enough.
Suffice it to say, what I am told, and I do not know this for a fact, that this was a single incident with Mr. Mahoney, who has now pled guilty to the charges, or whatever the disposition of the criminal charges was, and that there was no further information or evidence to do anything else with him.
Okay. Do you know Paul Cahill?
That's the name of the fellow who owned property in New
yes.
Brunswick. I do not.
Okay. And so I guess the last thing on Mahoney would be, and Mr. O'Rourke, they both gave donations to your political campaign. And, one time I asked you, are you going to give them back the donations? You said, well, why would I want to give them to them? Yeah. It makes sense. But would you be willing to take those donations and forward them, donate them to another good cause, like the soup kitchen?
I do that all the time.
Okay, well, I'm just asking specifically the Mahoney donation and the O'Rourke donation. Would you be willing to pass those on to?
Over the course of a year, my political action committee makes contributions in large amounts to a variety of charitable events. So to specifically say that I've given that several $100 contribution to somebody does nothing other than try to make it look like I don't have any involvement with these people. And I'm not about the business of pretense, and which is the reason why I gave you the answer in the first place. You asked me, why don't you give the money back to them? Mm-hmm. And I said, why would I want to reward the people by making them richer? So in the course of what I do, I already give far in excess of the amounts that they've contributed to charitable and other worthwhile causes, and I will continue to do that.
Okay, terrific. I've been kind of hard on you today. I want to just give you the chance to.
You've not been hard on me, Charlie.
Okay, good. Well, maybe next time.
Okay.
What I would like to do is give you the chance to speak about what you would like to speak about. What can New Brunswick residents expect in 2015? What do you have on your?
I gave a State of the City address.
Yeah.
I'll let that stand for what we look forward to in 2015, and I appreciate the opportunity to sit down and talk to you.
Sure. Okay. Well, thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to doing this again soon.
Okay. All right, Charlie. Good talking to you.